Hello, and welcome to my show, The Thriving Woman. I am your host, Carmel Austin.
Monday, another week, I can't believe I'm counting down the minutes till it's Tuesday. Another day back on.
I will be sharing keys to help you form healthy hearts and boundaries. I'll see you in the show. Hi, folks. This is Carmel here, and this is another episode of The Thriving Woman. I'm thrilled that I have my beautiful friend Christy on with me today. Welcome, Christy.
Thank you so much for having me again. It's my
Christy
pleasure.
Christy and I have teamed up together and co-host. And if you haven't seen our first podcast show that we did together, it was just so heart-moving. This year, Christy invited me onto her series, Pain into Purpose. And I had the privilege of sharing about my journey and what some of the things that I've been through in my life. And so if you've missed that, we would encourage you to listen to that. But today we're talking about the things that have been happening in our lives the last few months, because sometimes, folks, life gets in the way, and Christy can really stay attuned to that as well as we share about the things that we go through in life. For me personally, I had my very dear auntie pass away in her 90s, and she was like my other mother, and I was one of her girls. And I know for Christy, she's had some personal loss as well with her mum passing away. And so, as women, we are often women who give a lot to everybody with ministry, with life. And sometimes we just need to pull away and we need to spend time with God. We need to do self-care. We need to do all those things around our home that we put aside. And so today, Christy and I are going to be talking more about pain into purpose and the things that we have learned over the last month or two with the time that we have spent with our own pain and the purpose that God has given us. So Christy, with me starting out today, do you want to share a little bit with my audience about that process of grief? Because I know in our last podcast show, we talked about your husband and his passing and what you went through and the summit. And so tell us a little bit about what you've been up to the last few months.
Well, my mom passed away at the beginning of summer, and the way I explain it to people is I just feel like grief is kind of like when it's compounded like that, it's like a stack of paper towels that have been wet but are now dry. And then that new grief is like a new wet paper towel on top of that stack, and it kind of soaks through a few layers and it gets them wet again. And it just feels like it kind of opens that grief up a little bit more again, and you start over again in some ways. And for me this summer, I just felt a little bit stunted. I couldn't move forward at times, and I reminded myself of the things that some of the speakers spoke about in my Pain into Purpose Summit, and reminded myself what I told other people too. Just, you got to keep moving and trusting the Lord and letting him move. And I talked to a friend who said that he spent something like 3 or 4 hours a day with the Lord before he went out into his ministry. And he does life coaching with pastors. And I thought in my own mind, I thought, how in the world is that even possible for a person to do that? And then when my mother passed away, I found myself doing that, not 3 and 4 hours some days, but most of the time it's 1.5 hours, or sometimes 2.5, 3 hours. But on a general day, it's about an hour and a half. And it is just like, that's where I get my strength from. And that's the connection with the Lord that I really need to go into each day. And he's taught me a lot this summer. And I've accomplished a few things that where my mind couldn't really move forward in some ways, it moved forward in other ways. So I just kept looking to the Lord for my strength and my direction.
And that's the key, isn't it, Christy? You know, I know when I lost my babies many years ago, I used to just lay on the lounge in God's presence. And then, you know, I've lost my mum and dad as well. And as we get older, we journey with grief differently. But it's so true when we lose someone, with me losing my auntie. She was my mum's oldest sibling, and she was like our grandmother because my mum had lost her mum when she was a little girl with their baby. And so grief does get piled on top of the other. And then, of course, for me, the way that I processed my grief was that I was writing in my book,
Mhm.
you know, and my personal book, my history book, my heritage book. So, you know, through my eyes. And so, you know, we all process that differently. And it's
Yeah.
okay to do that, isn't it, Christy? It's okay to do that, folks. It's okay to spend that time. And, you know, when you spend it with God, that's self care, where you
Mhm.
come and you just lay your burden down at His feet and you let His love soak over you through His word, through spending time listening to music or whatever it is that you do that is going to encourage your heart. And, you know, this is what my podcast shows are about, you know, helping you thrive in your season, helping you be honest with how you feel and what you're going through. And I know as well, Christy, you have published some books, some
Mhm.
short story books over that time as well. And that's really exciting for you too, because you've been able to get in and do that. Because I know as a publisher, and I've got my next co-author book coming up, Courageous Voices Unlocked. That's time consuming doing that, getting onto Amazon and getting your book up there, getting it ready to be published. That's all time consuming. And you know, they're precious things that, you know, they're gifts that we give to people. So, Chris, you want to share a little bit about that journey and what got you to that place where you have published them and the disciplines that you have put into place to get them there?
Yeah. After my time with the Lord in the morning, I would make myself go and do a little exercise, talk to a friend. On her way to work, we would just kind of encourage each other before our day, pray for each other. And then I would sit down and start office time and work on those books. And my mother taught me from a very early time. I can remember seeing her sit up in her bed with her Bible out on her lap and her colored pencils, and she'd be coloring different verses in different, I guess they were different themes. Um, and I don't know where that Bible is. I have never seen it since. I just remember when I was little, and she taught me that it's so important to not just study the Bible in Sunday school or at church, but you walk with Jesus every day. And so the book that I first published is Mommy and Me Discover Gratefulness. And it's for early childhood, like first grade, second grade, third grade, fourth grade, maybe children, and the adult that they spend time with. So there's a version for mommies, daddies, grandmas, and grandpas, and that child, so that they can memorize a verse each week and spend time thanking God for something that happened that day. So every single day they talk about gratefulness, and then they record it. So it becomes kind of like a keepsake. And I dedicated that little group of books to my mom because she taught me. And anything that I do for the Lord is because she poured that into me. And now I pour it out into the world as much as I can do for the Lord.
Well, what a blessing that is, that through that grief that you that opened that door for you to be able to reflect and
Yes.
consider. I know for me, when my auntie passed away, I was just typing out things about my heritage book and my family and my trip to Israel and how my grandfather and his wife Rose came to Australia from Lebanon on a ship, and my auntie was 16 months old, and then how their life, and that was when the depression was, and then talking through my eyes of how all the stories that I heard from my mum and her family and what their losses. But the thing that got me the most over my life was that my mum always honoured the church and the nuns and the priests and the people who cared for them. And my mum had such an open heart. And, for me, I look the most like my mum, and I reflect a lot of her in me, and I'm, can be bubbly and love people like my mum, and I know I was the favourite. Even my dad told me that at mum's funeral, even though all the family knew that I was the favourite, but I was the youngest, and I spent a lot of time with mum and in the house. And for me now, I love to spend time in my home and doing things in my home. So running my business from my home and in my office here, and doing my quilting and doing my creativity like my mum. And, over the years I've served in the school with scripture and all of those things. And it's okay to honour that. And it's so lovely that you have those books. So folks, we'll put that link in the podcast as well for you to access those books. So share just a key through them with our listeners about things that, I know you talked about, it's a scripture verse and all that, but share a little bit about what it means to you to have done that and to be moving forward on serving the Lord.
It makes me so excited because I know that although it's just a small thing, the Lord might use one of those books to inspire a child to grow in faith, and not just in gratitude, but to trust the Lord because he did this great thing today. What's he going to do tomorrow? And to learn to walk with the Lord. And it's a daily thing. Well, it's 5 days a week. And so it's not just at church. It's not just on Sunday, So I'm so excited to be able to hopefully inspire the next generation, and that the Lord will work through each of these books. And I pray for, and I say it in the book, I write a little note in the beginning of each one to mom or dad or grandma or grandpa, whoever is spending that time with the child, and just encourage them that children are watching you, even though you may not notice, but they notice so many things we don't think about them noticing. And it's very important
to us as well.
I'm sorry?
They're listening to us as well.
Right. Yes. So I wrote in there that it's important for them to see you worship and how you worship. And it's also important for them to see you handle things in a good light, in a positive light, to see how you speak to people, and just to walk through your day with gratitude toward the Lord. So a lot of people, it's been like a fad lately to exercise gratitude to feel better, but where does that gratitude go if it isn't going to the Lord? It's, in the world, people exercise gratitude, but we know that gratitude belongs to the Lord. It's a way to worship. So I think it's very important. It also, there's a prayer at the end of each day also for, or a reminder to close in prayer.
So have you found this to be very healing on your journey of grief, with you losing your mum and releasing your books, Christy, for you personally?
I do feel like that. It has given me hope. It's, I know where my mom is. I wish I could have shared these with her. But she had dementia, and we've been saying goodbye to her for a few years. Really, it's been a long, sad walk, but I know where she's at now, and she's more alive now than ever before. As I said before with my husband, it's just amazing to think how they are living now. It's just so enlightening to think what are they doing right now. I'm so excited to know someday to be able to see how they've been in their in their heaven life. So
Yeah. So do you feel that as a mum, because I know you have a beautiful daughter that you adopted as well, that, this whole process just really enriches your relationship with her as well and gives you
yeah,
that real gratitude and thankfulness to God, with where you're going, where you've come from, where you are now?
yeah. She and I spend time doing some devotion time together, and we're actually working on a mother and teen daughter journal, um, gratitude journal, not gratitude journal. It's like a Bible study journal. Just a short thing just to get each other thinking in the shoes of the other person, because it's really hard for moms and daughters as teenage when they hit the teenage years. And so we're working on that just to go through it ourselves, but also I'm working on that for the next thing I publish, or maybe the next thing after the next thing, depending on when it happens. But that's what we are in the middle of that right now too. And she said the other day, Mom, we need to be working on that journal, because we hadn't been for a while. And so she's seeing the value in it. And I think she realizes that when we work on that together, we're working together on something, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
It makes
absolutely.
us
And
think.
it's an honoring thing, the fact that both of you and she's asking you. And I think folks, those of you who are listening, that our children want to do things with us. They want to be able to, get in there and make decisions. So with Christy, I know Christy and I have shared some really heart things this year. And to hear Christy share that her and her daughter are sharing that is so precious. And that's, what the Thriving Woman is about. It's about spending that time. It's about sometimes pulling away like we have, even though, for me, I've got, my podcast show, my magazine, Mystery of Eden, coming out, my books. I'm working on my own self-care as well, and my family, and hubby and I got away as well, in winter here in Australia, and seen some beautiful blossoms. And so we all have those personal things happening in our lives. But I've already, for someone who's worked with children, and I'm so blessed that I have grandchildren, to ask my granddaughter, what do you want to do today with Nanny? And she wants to draw, she wants to create, she wants to walk the dog, she wants to go to the park. She cooks with me. We made pizzas the other week, and she did all the preparation, and she rolled out, the dough with me, and she was telling me how she does that with her mum when they make one of their special preparations, and she wanted to grate all the cheese and put all the toppings on. And we need to include our children and our grandchildren in our everyday lives, because that gives them purpose and focus. So that's really, so exciting, Christy, that, you're doing that. And I know, Christy, too, you're wanting to do Pain into Purpose, the next. But I really honor you, Christy, for saying you needed to take that time off. You needed to take that time off. And in that, you've been so productive with doing your books and time with your daughter, because, for God, He doesn't put that pressure on us. He doesn't tell us that there's a season and a time that we have to do things. Often as women and people, we do that to ourselves. So I think, as you've taken that time out, Christy, you've had so much things blooming in your life. And it's just so it's an honor and a blessing to be doing that. So, as we're wrapping up, would you like to just share with my audience one key with what you've found over this last few months as you talked about that layers of grief and as it soaked down, and then as you spent that time writing and publishing and having your daughter there encouraging you? What can you share with my audience that's going to encourage them today?
I feel like one of the deepest things I learned this summer in spending that time with the Lord is, number one, is that it's so important to not skip that. And I think it's the best when it's the first thing in the morning. And the deepest thing I learned was that the best fruit grows in the valleys, not the mountaintops. And this has been a hard valley, walking through life without my husband, and then facing this with my mom, and just realizing that even in those dark times, the Lord is still there. And sometimes that's the time when we're the most receptive, because we're really leaning on him. We're depending on him for our strength, our sanity some days. And so we're listening. And that's when he can speak the loudest, when we're really tuned in. So I think sometimes we feel like we just can't take another step and just take that time to spend with God and focus on him. You said something in the last, when you were talking about, as grandparents and mothers, we want to spend time with our children, and it's important to do that every day. And that's just exactly what we're talking about with God, and how we need to spend time with him every day. He's our father and we're his kids, and it's so important. So we grow in our relationships with our family here on earth, but also with him. And it's so important to do that daily.
So, folks, the keys that Christy's talking about is that we have a Father in heaven who loves us, and he created us, and he's given us the Bible with examples of what people have gone through, and he invites us to come into his presence daily. He invites us to come to him, and not only in the hard times, but in the good times. For me, I like to put on some praise worship and be having that happening as I'm doing my housework on my study, or doing my books and preparing. I love to play in Canva and create things in there, but I always like to have some praise music on. I like to go out walking and doing all those things and chatting with the Lord and asking him. I thought last year when my book, The Artist Haven, came out, I would just go to the next book. And God just pulled me up in my tracks and said, no, you need to rest. You need to celebrate. You need to process. There's so much more I needed to do around our book. I needed to get it into the Australian market. And I needed to learn that, my self-care is really valuable as well. And in that self-care is spending that time with God, listening to some podcast shows, putting on music, being around people who's going to uplift you and encourage you, and doing that self-care, particularly, for me, as I'm in my late 50s, we need to do all those things. And for me, I'm blessed with grandchildren and my husband, and having that balance with them as well, and making sure you get lots of rest. So, that theme about the Proverbs 31 woman, it's okay to take that time out. It's okay. It's not about the doing, it's about the heart attitude. And I know for me, folks, recently, God's really been, looking at my heart. How am I responding to my neighbor? How am I responding to my husband? How am I responding to what's happening on social media? How am I responding to, how I'm speaking to myself as a woman and caring for me? And, as I've got older, multitasking can sometimes be really difficult. And I've really been learning to take time off on the weekends walk and rest and watch a movie and spend that time where, I'm feeding my spirit, feeding my soul. And I really believe that's what Christy's talking about today, as we spend that time honoring God, recognizing that He is our Father in heaven, spending that time listening to music, reading His Word, pulling things out of there that are going to speak to our hearts, spending time with our children, our grandchildren, our families, and on ourselves. So I just want to encourage you folks as we wrap up this session that, it's okay to spend that time. It's okay to say no to other commitments, and to be able to see those things achieved in our lives. We don't know how long we're here on this earth for. So, if you've got some heart dreams and some things that you want to do, like Christy and I publish some books and, go after those things. I know I'm working on my self-care as well and my health, and really, really re-establishing them, that I would encourage you that it's okay to turn your phone off and your social media and your TV and spend that quality time with God, spend that quality time with yourself, with your children, and give yourself healthy rest and eat those good foods, because that is what's going to give you the energy. Then when you go and do those things, you'll be able to focus. Your brain won't be fog. And so, and we know that when you go through grief and you go through those things, you do get foggy in the brain, and, and you need to give yourself that time to be able to process. So thank you again for tuning in to another podcast show. Christy will be joining me again. There are quite a few other podcast shows that we will be sharing about this journey of pain into purpose. And I'm really excited, about all the things that she is doing and the self-care that she has put into place. And we want to encourage you all to do that as well. So I'm going to say I will see you in another episode, and God bless for now.